Okay, good morning, everybody. Learning sponsors, a year of learning by the many friends of Stephen Vigdor, L'Zechen Nishmat Simcha Melech Ben Meir Leib Halevi, friends of Marcy Kurtz, in memory of her great niece, Leah Bracha, Isaac and Evelyn Blacho, in memory of his sister, Chaya Rachel Bas Isser, friends of Leonie Meiselman, Leah Saber Bas Chanach Zundel, 2 months of learning by the friends of Milton Miller in honor of his second bar mitzvah, a month of learning by Charlie Gelfenstein in memory of his mother, Dacia Gidl Bas Meir Halevi, and his father, Meir Ben Yaakov, Chaim and Phyllis Reese, in memory of his father, Mordechai Ben Yom Tov Lipa, Isaac and Evelyn Blachor, in memory of his mother, Zissel Bat Chaim Yitzchak. A week of learning by Shoshana Berger in memory of her father, Tzvi Ben Shragadov HaKohen, Susan Fruchter Kramer, in memory of her father, Moshe Ben Yechiel Mechel. Today, a day of learning by myself and my wife, in memory of my mother, Ita Perel Bat Shlomo Zalman, and by Edie Vigdor, in memory of her mother-in-law, Mindel Bas Harav Shmuel. And Shamas Heaven Aliyah, Crank Rafia Vadi Yeshir, Shema Tzliya, L'chol B'nai Yisrael, Good Ben Shtiyan.
Amen.
Okay. All right. So, get my head back on. All right. So, if we're going to pick up in the bottom of Lamed Hey Amud Beis, right? Okay. That's a good place. Yeah. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, says Rabbi Yehuda, Adam mevi korban ashir al ishto b'chol korbanot shechayevet. Okay, we finished this up yesterday by saying that, this argument about when one brings, who one brings, whether it's for a minor, whether it's for an adult, things like that. And what we're citing here is the example, having mentioned that, how is it possible that one brings for a minor girl? Can she give birth? No, yet we cited another source that shows that it's possible she might give birth because of the use, she's included among the list of the 3 women that use a moch.
Which we do not pass.
Okay.
They use that, but if you look in Shulchan Aruch, a nursing woman or a pregnant woman may not use them.
That depends on the posting.
I didn't say posting. I said if you look in Shulchan Aruch.
I know what Shulchan Aruch says, but it also depends on the posting too. Right? Okay. All right. So then we come back now to the statement by Rabbi Yehuda that the husband must provide a equivalent of a wealthy or a well-to-do person's, korban, regardless of her status, and any other korban that she is obligated to. Why? Because it's written in the ketubah, shekach kotev la b'achrayut de'it lech alai min kadmat dina. For any responsibility that I have from you, regarding your obligations from before this day. That's where we ended yesterday. Okay. So on Lamed Vav Amud Aleph, we're going to pick up. Right. Meitiv Rav Shimi Bar Abba. Okay. So now the question we're still going to deal with. Our concept from our earlier question was whether the Kohen is a Shliach Shamayim or whether he is Shliach Adam, in a sense. Okay. A person. In other words, Shliach Avas or Shliach Shamayim. That was our initial question that the Gemara started with. Okay. And then we were saying that's going to lead to that whole, ultimately lead back to the question of Nadarim. Okay. So Meitiv Rav Shimi Bar Abba, he said, raised the following challenge. Im Haya Kohen, if the person we're talking about is the Kohen. Okay, and then one of the question is, if I made the netter Kohen such and such, I won't benefit from him. Okay, that's one thing. Okay, so that's the question, part of the issue. All right, Im Haya Kohen Yizrok Alav Dam Chatato V'Dam Ashamo. Okay, so the Gemara here is still saying, let him spritz, so to speak, the blood from the chatat or the blood from the asham. Dam chatato shel mitzorah. Okay, so maybe we're talking here about a situation where the dam from the chatas offering of the mitzorah, okay, which
And only.
okay, and that would exclude the other individuals that we saw as mechasrei kapara, the other people like the or the yoledet, which we said earlier, the Gemara told us that that should be able to be done. Okay, why not simply make that specific example? Okay, v'dam ashamo shel mitzorah, and regarding the blood from the asham offering of the mitzorah, why that specific example? Dichtiv zo tieh Torat HaMitzorah, because the same way we had earlier lashon, earlier language of zo Torat, etc., that this is the Torah, the injunction regarding the fact of giving it in those situations. So here we have that same lashon, that same language, implying that the Kohen then can do it without the consent, and that's the key element here of the Mitzorah. Okay, Bein Gadol, Bein Katan. We said whether they're an adult or whether they're a minor. It's none, but we have a Mishnah.
So up till here, we're saying that they are representatives of the human.
Okay, so this
But
would
now we can
imply,
approve
it would
that part.
imply that they're representatives of the human. Okay, let's use that concept. Why? It's none, but we have a text. It says as follows, and now we're going to get to the real challenge. HaKohanim shepigalo b'mikdash. What about those Kohanim who have committed the act of some sort of thinking or
Incorrect
mindset
action.
or approach, okay, that results in pigul in the Beis Mikdash? What about those situations? Mizidim chayavim, if they did it on as an act of mezid, right, with intent, chayavim. Okay, what does it mean they're chayavim? Excuse me.
Pay for the action.
They cannot expect the bringer of the korban to replace it. They must pay in that situation. Okay?
What's the cycle of a pioneer for thinking they'll ever do something like that?
Okay. All right, I will answer to you as a Kohen. Okay, you're busy. Somebody, Marty, is giving you a Kohen to take a korban to take care of, but in the meantime, Zev also approached you. Okay, and Reuven also approached you. Okay, so you're busy. So you're thinking, well, gee, I will take care of this one, and I will eat, or I will do something with the other one.
It sounds to me far-fetched. If he knows the halacha, what he's doing, he ain't gonna take 3-4 kabbanas at one time. Not in a million years.
I don't know. I'm not a
It
Kohen.
obviously happened, so the Torah wouldn't talk about it.
Okay, all I'm saying is right. A
If
clear
it's
example. A
one
clear
time,
example would be as if his intent is to eat it beyond
And
the
it's an
appropriate
over,
time.
Or if he's gonna eat it beyond, he thinks it's a shlomim and it's a chatas, so he thinks he can eat it for 2
That
days.
could be.
if he made a mistake of what it is, if they thought it
That's
Right.
not a mental process.
That's why it's a
That's what
mental
people-
issue. That's why it's a mental issue. I get confused between what this one gave me and what that one, things like that. Okay, in any case, mizidin chayavin, okay, what happens? Ha, which implies ha shogagin peturin, that therefore if it was done inadvertently, and that's how we're translating shogeg, then it is exempt. Ella, rather, right? Shepigulan pigul. Nevertheless, even if it's done in a shogeg situation, that korban is considered
No
no, not valid. It's because it's pigul. Okay. Iyamad b'shlema shlucha d'shemayim havu. If you're going to say, as we initially thought, that maybe we're implying that the Kohanim are the shluchim of Shemayim, Hainu, okay, shepigulan pigu. And therefore, that's why we say, even in that situation, that status is pigu. Ela iamart shluchei didan havu. But if you're going to say that the Kohanim are the peoples, the bringers,
There should be no such
Okay.
thing as people.
right, representatives, amai pigulan pigu. Why then would we say that the status of that korban is pigu? It shouldn't be pigu whatsoever, right? That's the point.
Well, read the next sentence.
As we go on, lemale. Why? Because the person could say, shlicha shavitich v'tekune v'lo le'avute. Because as my representative, I chose you to act for my benefit and not for my detriment. Okay? So if the bringer says that, and now you're not bringing them you've done it for their detriment because the korban is pigul and therefore not valid, you as the person are basically nullifying their shlichus in that situation. That's the point. Okay? So the Gemara goes on.
But more specifically, it should only be the das of the donor, because the shliach is like his hand.
Right.
The shliach can't have it.
Shlucho shel adam kamoto is what we say. Right? Okay. So what happens? Amre shani gabe pigul. We might say pigul is a unique and different situation. The amar kra, because the pasuk says lo yichashev lo mikom makom. Okay, he should not have that mindset whatsoever under any circumstances. Okay, all right. Now, Gemara comes back and says, let's go back to an earlier discussion that we cited previously. Gufa, come back. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, he says as follows: Hakol tzrichin da'at chutz mechusrei kapar. According to Rabbi Yochanan, that the Kohen needs the consent of the bringer of the offering, with the exception of those people who have not yet gained atonement, which we said, for example, was the Zav, the Zava, the Yoledet, okay, the Mitzora, things like that, because they don't reach the appropriate level of atonement till nightfall.
And then they need a korban the next month.
Right. Okay. All right. So what happens? Shaharei Adam mevi korban al banav v'al benotav haktanim. For we say that a person can bring an offering for the benefit. Okay. Okay. Even if that individual is a minor.
Legally has
Okay.
no das.
And therefore, since they cannot give consent, since by definition they don't have das, that's the point. Ela me'ata yavi adam chatas chelev al chavero. If that's the case, we may therefore say that a person can bring a chatas, and it's nicknamed, I'm going to say for this chat of chelev, because chelev was the most common phenomenon where a person was required to bring a chatas. So that's why it has, as I said, what I'll call the nickname chatas chelev. Okay, for another person. Okay, shekain adam mevi al ishto shoteh, because likewise we see that a person may bring the chatas for his wife who gave birth when she is in a a condition, okay, not a condition not mentally appropriate. Kir Rabbi Yehuda, as was said by Rabbi Yehuda. Now, Alama Amar Rabbi Eliezer. On what point of this when was Rabbi Eliezer's statement? Hifrish chatat chelev al chavero lo asa klum. That Rabbi Eliezer disagrees and says that if somebody put aside a chatas for whatever reason, for neighbor or whatever, Lo asa klum, he hasn't done anything. It's not valid. Ishto shoteh echidami. So how then can you compare this to the situation where the woman is not competent and the husband has an obligation to bring the chatas for her under those circumstances? I da'achla kashehi shota. Okay, if we're saying that this woman ate the chalev, okay, while she was in non-compos mentis, incompetent, lav bat korbani, then she's not even required to have the korban whatsoever, right? Ve'i da'achla kashehi pikachat. And if we're saying that she ate this chalev while she was still sane and sensible, vinishtatet, and then she became incompetent. Ha'amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, Amar Rabbi Abahu, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Didn't Rabbi Yirmiyah say in the name of Rabbi Abahu, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Achal chalev, okay, that if she ate chalev there, bishogeg, we need to understand, vehifrish korban, and she put aside the animal, set aside already the animal to be a korban, venishtanta, and then she became incompetent, v'chazar venishtafa, and then afterwards she became cured and became more reasonable,
So that
sensible.
animal went through a
Okay.
period of unnecessity.
Exactly what happened, since there was a time frame, a window, I'm going to say, where she was not competent, and therefore that animal was not able to be brought under those circumstances. Once you defer that korban, it can no longer be brought again. Okay, therefore what happens? Pasul, then that korban is pasul.
But that could apply to a person who suddenly loses consciousness.
That's
or
what we're
whatever else.
talking about.
Exactly,
Right,
exactly,
right,
Steve.
right.
He took the korban, I'm gonna owe this korban, then
Right.
he went nuts, then he took his meds.
Right.
And he's sane again.
Right, and
So that animal
but
is
because-
possibly a-
but because there was that window of non-compos mentis, whatever, okay, of non-consent, whatever term we want to use, that korban is right. Okay, va'oel v'nidcha yidche, and there's the Gemara telling us, spelling it out for us. Since it was put off,
that's
as a
it.
result, it is no longer. It has been considered no longer a viable option to act as the korban. Okay, ela me'ata, but from here, okay, yavia dam pesach al chavero. We might then
So
consider,
this challenge is bringing it to this
That's right.
crazy life.
okay, not only for the crazy wife, it challenges it for another situation. Normally, we say for the korban pesach, you have to be registered. In a sense, you have to be
On the list.
considered part of that household, okay, which is what the registration process entails. Okay, so what about the fact of saying that, does that really still clearly imply? Okay, because you may have thought, oh, gee, I'm going to include Zev, I'll pick on Zev again, okay, as part of my household, and he'll be Yotze then a korban pesach, and I don't need his consent.
He has to give.
That's the
he has to- He
implication.
has to give a fruit or something.
He
to-
has to be part
Except
of
for
it,
the- Except for kids.
right, not for minors. Okay, so that's the question. So I'm challenging even that concept,
Concept.
more than just challenging the concept of the incapable wife. Okay, Shekena dam mevi al banav al benotav ktanim, because we know that regarding the korban pesach, you don't need the consent of minor children because you can automatically considering them part of your
On the other
household.
hand, if you add a name to the list, this kid.
All right, Alma, therefore, Amar Rabbi Elazar, says Rabbi Elazar, if Rish Pesach al Chavero, lo asa klum. And therefore, that's why Rabbi Elazar says in that situation, even if you did include for your Korban Pesach without the consent of that person and without their registration, thinking that you could do that for their benefit without
then
consent,
there is no
you
korban.
did no, there, it is not valid for that person. Okay, and therefore that's why he can also say it's not valid for the wife that's not competent as well. Okay? Now, Amar Rabbi Zera,
So the question is, why can you bring for the kids?
okay? Seh lebeit avot. But our pasuk says that it is a seh for the household. Loved, all right? That is not necessarily a Torah mandated requirement.
These are the children.
Okay? Umimai, based on what? Miditnan. Why? Because we have a Mishnah that teaches. Ha'omer levanav hareini shochet et Pesach al mi ya'aleh mikem rishon b'Yushalayim. In other words, I will include whichever one of you in the Pesach offering list, the first one who gets to Jerusalem. Kevan shechnis rishon rosho v'rubo. So once the first one gets the majority of his head and shoulders or body in the Azara, all right? Zacha,
No, they go to the city, not the Azara. Because it says when you get to Yerushalayim.
right, okay? Zacha bechelko umizache et achiv imo. Not only does he merit a portion of the Korban Pesach, but he's also zoche then
His
other
siblings.
siblings. Okay, that's the point. And from that statement, it would imply what that we're saying,
It's only to the
that it's the Rabbanan. Vi amart celebrate the right. And if you were to say that this requirement of the animal is a Torah mandated, al bisra kai umazache laha, on that meat, okay, so to speak. Okay, can you say that he therefore is able to merit these other people? Ela lama lahu da'amar lahon avuhon. So why was it then that the father made that statement to them? Kadei lezarzan b'mitzvot, in order to encourage them to try to be appropriately observing the mitzvahs. Okay? Tane nami hachi. And if we remember that particular text, it taught as follows. Also, maaseh haya, that this was actually a true incident. And what happened? V'kadmu banot lebanim. And the girls got there ahead of the boys. Why? V'nimtza'u banot zrizot ubanim shfalim. And we find that the girls were right on and trying to do the mitzvah, and the boys were a little laid back. Okay? Put it that way. All right? V'torem et trumotav. Now we get to the next part of our Mishnah as we go to the next Amud, right? Ibailaho. So on the top of the new Amud, we asked the question, the following in the academy, in the base Midrash. HaTorem mishalo al shel chavero. Now notice, excuse me, yeah, we said it goes back to the next part of the Mishnah.
The beginning of it.
Okay? Excuse me. The language of this statement is HaTorem mishalo, one who gives, who separates, I'm going to say the truma from his portion for his friend. Now, my question would be, as we're going to go into the Gemara, who's the his?
The separator uses his own.
Whoa, wait, that's what the Gemara is going to have to deal with. Does the separator, is he separating it from what belongs to him for his neighbor? Or is he separating it from the neighbors?
Both Rashi and the
Okay.
Ran say it's.
I know what they say, right? You're right, okay? But the Gemara is going to have to deal with this question, okay? That's why I want to present it that way before giving it Okay, who's the his? Hatorei mishalo, one who separates the truma from his portion for his neighbor. Tzrich da'ato olo. Does he need his consent or not? The Gemara picks up now. We're going to accept the idea that hatorei mishalo initially is that the person is taking it from his own pile, okay, for the benefit for the neighbor, okay, and that's why we say zachin la'adam shelo b'fanav. So the Gemara goes on. Mi amrinan, do we say kevan desechutu lo, because it's for benefit, okay, a merit for him. Zachin la'adam shelo b'fanav, lo tzarich dat, that he does not need his consent, or dilma, or perhaps mitzvah dilehi, perhaps he wants to do the mitzvah himself. It's his own mitzvah, and he's pleased to do it, but still, okay, needs the friend's consent. V'necha leila ma'abde, and he'd rather do it himself. Tashma, listen to the following bright. Torem et trumotav ve'et masrotav leda'ato. According to this brighter, one separates his truma and his masrot according to his consent. But right, this is now saying it's the owner of the piles, okay, as opposed to the separator, okay. B'mayas kinan, what are we talking about? Ilema min ba'al keri al shel ba'al keri. If we're talking about the owner of the pile separating on his own pile, Balkri, okay, right, that's true, okay. Ula da'ato deman, okay, all right. Ula da'ato deman, and it's consent according to whom? If we're talking about his own consent on his own part, man shavyu hashaliach. Okay, who then made the shaliach, the separator, the representative of the owner of the pile? Ela the da'ate de ba'al kri, but we're talking instead about the consent of the owner of the pile. Ha, kimahanile. But in that case, he's bringing benefit to him.
Yeah.
Okay. And how is that possible? The ka'avid shlichute. Why? Because he's carrying out representation for him. Okay. And of course, we're saying, didn't he make a vow not to benefit? Okay, that there would be no benefit. Ela mishalo. So it must be from his own. Okay, the separator's pile. Okay, al shel kri. Okay, on the owner's pile. Ulada'ato demand. But then according to the consent of whom? If you're going to say that it's based on the consent of the owner of the pile, but here he's bringing benefit to him. But no, it must be that we're saying it's on the consent of his own. And from the separator's own pile, he is therefore acting and taking it for the other person.
Which means the other person winds up with 11%, 12% more stuff.
Ve'i amarta. And if you want to say tzarich da, that it needs his consent, here again we're saying he's benefiting him. Elelav ein tzarich da. If that's the case, are we not saying that he does not need consent? Le'olam mishel ba'al kri al ba'al kri. No, we're saying here that it must be the owner of the pile is doing it on his own pile. Kida'amar Rava, excuse me, as was stated by Rava, Ba'omer, Kol Harotze Litrom, Yavo V'Yitrom. In a situation where Rava says, the owner of the pile announces whoever wants to come and take truma from this pile may come and do so. Hachanami ba'omer v'chulei. Here too we're saying it must be a situation where the person announced that.
So it's now open to anyone,
Right,
and therefore he's not specifically benefiting the
right,
power.
because the person who comes along, the one who did the separation, heard him announce, anybody who wants to come take truma, go right ahead. Okay, so he's not personally
Right.
benefiting, and therefore it's not in contradiction to the vow. Okay, let's go on. By mane, by mane Rabbi Yirmiyah, mi Rabbi Zeir. So Rabbi Yirmiyah asks Rabbi Zeir the following. Okay, let's see. Okay, hatorem mishelo al shel chaveru. One who takes from his own, okay, and does it for another person. Tovat hana'ah shel mi.
Who's supposed
The
to be
benefit
grateful?
of gratitude belongs to whom?
Who's supposed to be grateful?
Okay, now I'm going to point out just real quick as we'll go on that the Tovat Hana'ah really implies which Kohen, who has the right to choose the Kohen that receives the Truma. That's the Tovat Hana'ah that we're talking about.
Don't
Okay, is it the person who did the separation, or is it the person who owned the pile? Okay, who gets to choose the coin? Okay, all right. Now we should know, by the way, I didn't write down which note it was, but Art Scroll has a note on this piece informing us that there can be, note 11, some side benefit to the person.
be related. by
Okay,
marriage.
that would be one option. It tells the story. What happens if your granddaughter married somebody who was a Kohen and you doing
Wanna
it that
give
way?
it to him.
Want to give it to him? Okay, but besides that, there could be some other financial benefits too. Okay, anyway, so who gets Tovat Hana'ah? Who gets the benefit? Okay, all right. Me Amrina, do we say? Eat lav pire dahayach, if it's not the produce of this one, mi metaknin kiraya dahahu, okay, do we say then that that it's the one who does the separating from that pile, okay? O Dilma, or perhaps ilav ka'arya dahahu, if it's not if it's not the person to whom the pile belonged, lahavyan piri dahadim truma. That
The guy didn't give rishus,
that's
then what you took.
then
would not be
then
true.
can we say that that produce is really going to be valid truma offering? Okay, because you didn't have the consent. Okay, amarle, he says them amarkra. The pasuk tells us, et kol tvuat zarecha vinatata. Notice, by the way, he includes that word in the pasuk, in his quote of the pasuk. All of the tvua from your produce, from your etc., that you give, right? Ativ. So what I would challenge us, and therefore saying,
Even though that's
Right.
later.
okay, in other words, it would imply that the owner of the produce, that is the person that has tovat hana'ah. That the okay, that's what it seems to imply. Ative, but I would challenge Torem et trumato ve'et masrotav leda'ato. But we have this writer that tells us that you give the
This is
truma,
our Mishnah, the first
okay,
line of our
right?
Mishnah.
That you give it according to the consent of that person. V'yamart, and if you're going to say, excuse me, tovas hana'ah, the Baal Hakri, that the benefit, the gratitude benefit, goes to the owner of the pile, ha, come, mahanila. Here he's giving him benefit to him. Elashmamina, but we must learn from this, tovas hana'ah, delay, that the benefit of the
That
gratitude
taker does the
goes
giving.
from the separator, the person who
Who
takes
took the truma
takes the
gets to give it
truma,
to whoever.
that's he chooses. Amre. Now, so that would imply clearly that it's the, as I said, the separator, the taker of the truma, is the one who gets hana'ah, right, and chooses the coin. Now the Gemara comes back. Lo, no, mashal Baal Hakri al shel Baal Hakri. Okay, all right. So maybe not. It's not the case. Okay, maybe we're going to say that it's the owner of the pile. Okay, that should still get it. Ulada'ato, the Baal Hakri. Okay, and it's a situation where it's based on the consent of the owner of the pile. But Omer, because when he says, Kol harotzeh letrom yavovet yitrom, because he said, whoever wants to come and take the truma is welcome to do so, and therefore he's not really receiving any direct benefit from it.
Because there are many of them, and could have been many people.
Other
that's
people.
all.
Okay, let's go on. Tashma, listen to the following now. The Amar Rabbi Abahu, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. In the name of Rabbi Abahu, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Hamakdish Mosif Chomesh. Okay, the one who consecrates adds a fifth. Okay, and then what happens? Umitkaper oseh tmura. And the one who has had to exchange it has to make the exchange. Okay, what happens? Vahatorei mishalo al she'eno shalo.
Story.
Right?
This is if you are over Me'ila, you have to do it yourself.
Okay. Well, I'm going to phrase it a little differently. You're right, but okay. If the person who consecrated the item, okay, he would need to add a fifth. But what happens if the other individual, okay, if it's a problem with the offering, he has to provide the replacement. V'hatorei mishalo al she'eno shalo. But in a situation where one has separated from his own, okay, on someone else's, tovat hana'ah shalo, he gets the benefit. Okay, now we get to our other part of our original Mishnah. Okay, where we said there, milamdo midrash halachot va'agadot, that it's possible for the person to teach him Torah sheba'al peh, midrash or halacha, sifrei, agadas, aval lo yilamdo mikra, but he cannot teach him scripture. Okay, mikra, my tama lo yilamdenu, regarding scripture, what is the reason that he cannot teach it to him? Mishum de kamahanile. Why? Because he's providing him a benefit, because he doesn't have to pay a tutor for learning Bible, for learning any kind of mikra. So therefore he's saving money, and that's considered a benefit, right? Midrash nami kamahanile. But isn't teaching him Torah sheba'al peh, isn't that also providing some sort of benefit to him? Amar Shmuel, so Shmuel, v'makom shenodlin sachar al hamikra ve'ein nodlin sachar al hamidrash. We're talking about a place where you get paid as a Chumash teacher, but you do not get paid when you do Torah Sheba'al Peh. My Pascha. So I just want to finish up. What's the difference? Let's go quickly to the top line on Lamed Zion. Hakamash Malan. Here it's because we maintain the following. Da'afilu b'makom shenotlin sachar. Even in a place where they do pay compensation, okay? Al hamikra shari lemishkal, regarding teaching chumash, okay, you allowed to get compensation. Al hamidrash lo shari lemishkal, but for oral Torah you are not permitted to compensation, and that's why many rabbeim throughout Chazal, okay, had clearly had certain professions, even and did not ever get paid on there for acting in a rabbinic capacity. Okay, that did not start happening till later in the Middle Ages.
And then it's only supposed to be compensation for work you might
Might
have
have
otherwise
missed.
had time to do.
Sure, you could have
Not
been
3.5
a rocket scientist, like a colleague I know who actually was.
Bob, you walking? You're
Well, a lot of rabbis work because they don't earn.
No, I know a colleague, a fellow who,
refused pay.
no, he didn't have to pay because his first career was a rocket scientist, and he earned enough money that he didn't have to get paid.
The rub in Long Beach, that's all. He insisted on getting paid, but he immediately donated his paycheck back to the shul. He felt that if he just did it stam for free, there's another halacha that